Hi, I'm Jason Ulster, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Author. Tonight we have author Patricia Sheehy and Karen Ryder, who wrote in a review for Patricia Sheehy in her magazine, or journal, Inner Tapestry. How are you?
I'm fine, Jason. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let me just read a little bit about Patricia and her book, and then Karen, because she did a review on her, is going to take over from there. Patricia Sheehy is an award-winning author with a passion for exploring the connection between mind, body, and spirit. In her novels, she seeks to understand how the past shapes our present experiences and the deep, often unexplained connection people feel for one another. Her articles and essays have appeared in local and national publications. She writes marketing and advertising copy for a wide range of business and organization. In addition, she offers individual and group mentoring to writers and holds workshops on writing and publishing. A Connecticut native, a resident of Wethersfield, Patricia holds a master's degree from Wesleyan University. Having grown up in the North End of Hartford, she called upon her child experiences of time and place as the setting for the early days of this novel. She and her husband now live in the historic town of Wethersfield, Connecticut. Well, Patricia, tell us a little bit about your book, the latest one, Field of Destiny.
Okay, well, Field of Destiny, I love this book, so it's really hard for me to be impartial about it, and Karen wrote a beautiful review about it. And basically what it does is it looks at how our past shapes our current life circumstances, but even more than that, it asks the question, do we have free will? Is there a destiny in place? As Carolyn Miss would say, do we make a sacred contract before we're born to live out certain pieces of our life, certain pieces of destiny, and can free will thwart that?
That's really what compelled me to want to write a review for Inner Tapestry Journal, is that this is, to me, the best book that Oprah Winfrey has not read. I think she needs to.
I love that, Karen. Thank you.
Love that.
You're welcome.
Well, tell us a little bit. I read the review that you wrote, and why did you like this book, and also what had you asked the certain questions that you asked her? And I'd like to hear some of the questions that you asked her.
Well, as a freelance writer myself, I specialize also in holistic health and metaphysical subjects and the writing process. And it was almost karmic the way I had met Patricia. I was organizing writers' workshops with a group associated with the Wethersfield Library a few years ago. And
by the way, you told me you actually lived in Wethersfield
yes,
for
I'm
a
a
short
former
while.
Wethersfield resident as well.
So you knew where the library was.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we've had a thriving writers' circle there. And we wanted to have Patricia come and speak with the group about how to incorporate esoteric subjects into a contemporary storyline. So she and I met, and at the time I had a brand new baby in a bassinet car seat when we met. And as we sat and spoke with one another, we felt a kinship that was uncanny, and soul sisters,
really?
Is what it felt like.
We talked about the book for 1 hour and about esoteric.
Well, the book had already been written by that time, right?
Yes,
okay.
yes. Actually, I have 2 novels out, Veil of Illusion and Field of Destiny, and they both explore what I call metaphysical topics, not paranormal, which is ghosts and goblins and vampires, but metaphysical, which means something beyond the physical, beyond the veil, which is why this one is called Veil of Illusion.
Hold it up for our viewers.
Beyond the veil. There we go.
Put that right there.
Okay. What is there beyond this physical world that might influence who we are today, that might shape us, and that might inform our spiritual side? You know, we're physical bodies, but we're also spiritual beings. And so that's what drives me to write about this. So Karen and I found that we were talking more about that. Yes, we were talking the same language. And so she asked me to come to the writers group at Wethersfield Library and talk about how you take something as large as that and as sort of almost intangible. You know, you can't touch the metaphysical. It's not like writing about driving a truck. So how do you take it and incorporate it into a novel.
And make it accessible for people of all or no spiritual tradition or religious pursuit. And that's really what's fascinating about Field of Destiny is the way that Patricia was able to touch the reader without imposing any type of religious tradition or expectation for spirituality or what is God. And she really explored and helped the reader explore in their own mind through the characters, what does it mean when I make a choice and that choice has repercussions? Is that something that was pre-planned for me? Did I really have free will in that situation? And what are the ripple or butterfly effects of that choice? And then another layer that Patricia introduces through the characters in the novel is what happens when you cross paths with someone who causes you to alter what may be your pre-planned your personal modus operandi.
And in with that, see, this is why we talked for hours, because let's say...
that's actually a subject that a lot of people can find interesting and common with.
Well, let's say you come into this world with what's called a sacred contract.
You know what I'm
your
thinking
destiny.
already. You know
what are you thinking already?
Like, we met. You're on the
Sure we
show.
did.
How is this going to change your life, okay?
Well, that would be called synchronicity, more than coincidence. If you
Okay.
meet up with people, it's also called angel tracks a lot.
Oh, okay.
The idea that it's more than coincidence, that people are brought together because it's their karma at play. It's time for them to meet and to be together for something. And the question becomes, in very simplistic terms, for instance, leaving the plot of the book behind for a minute, I was saying to my husband the other day, who, by the way, was the town engineer of Wethersfield, and we'll talk about how we did a great book launch, meet the author and the artist in a little bit. But I was saying to him the other day, our granddaughter, Veronica, is in college, and she was going to go to Central and then decided to go to URI. She met a lovely
What is URI?
University of Rhode Island.
Okay.
She met a lovely man, a boy there, a student, who she's very involved with. Now, if she had gone to Central, would she have just met somebody else and her life would have taken another path?
We don't know.
Or was it her destiny that she would have met Ian, her boyfriend, no matter what? And that's kind of the premise of
And would
Field
she
of
have met him in
Destiny.
this lifetime or another?
That's right.
That's another layer that Patricia incorporates.
So, Karen,
multi-layered lifetimes. So there's the story that is reaching into the present moment and following this character, Natalie Davenport, from a very misguided birth moment and the decisions that her birth mother made and how those influence the course, the trajectory of her life, and how her mother's repeated without giving too much away, repeated
patterns
of poor decision making for her daughter continue to affect Natalie as the main character's life, but that she also has a karmic debt. I don't want to say owed to, but that she is responsible for fulfilling to other individuals from other lifetimes that she has experienced.
Right.
Well,
and that's
I want to point out.
We're talking about this book right now, actually. So
Sure. Field of Destiny.
You know what? Maybe.
And I'll have you read a piece of that in a moment. But as an outsider, in a way, one of the things that I picked up right away, and I'm sure our viewers will be interested too, is that you're speaking a common language, and even some of the terms someone not involved with the subject would even recognize, but you two are speaking a common language. So, Karen, how did you pick up on this? What is your background?
My background
associated with this, and how did you get to have such a good review of her?
I've always been a seeker, and in fact, I would say if questions such as do I have free will or free choice make someone uncertain or uncomfortable, just think about how many times in a day you might say what if. That's where you're really asking, how might my life have been different had I chosen differently? Was I supposed to choose differently, or am I really right where I want to be? So those are questions from which I've always had an immense curiosity. My background is in health psychology and research, and I've studied yoga and meditation with a variety of traditions as well. So it's sort of a natural part of who I am. I couldn't imagine it not being part of something that I seek to know more about. And
But I would say, Karen, that you and I both work in our writing and what we do to make it accessible. In other words, when I write my novels, I'm writing stories. I'm writing stories about contemporary people, present day time, present locations, and having those characters have those same questions that Karen is saying, and maybe not always consciously. You know, maybe it's sort of like their life turns down a certain path, and they go, "Oh, this isn't what I expected."
Or they have that feeling, something's not right. I feel stuck. Something's out of place. I can't put my finger on it.
Right. So we might try to make it accessible. Yeah. So that's our goal, really, I think, in what we do individually, Karen and I, sometimes collectively and individually, is to try to make these concepts, which is why she invited me to that writers group at the Wethersfield Library, accessible. You know, and how do you do that? And I'm going to be teaching a writing class at Wethersfield Adult Ed, where people may want to learn how to do that. Here in town, Wethersfield Adult Ed, jumpstart your writing dream. And the idea is somebody may want to do that. Maybe they don't want to write about the metaphysical, but maybe they want to write about scientific concepts or, you know, the idea of cryogenics or something like that. How do you weave it into writing that's accessible for a reader who may have no knowledge of it?
It's very similar to what happens with science fiction. Science fiction is taking a concept within the realm of science that is, at least presently with our current knowledge base, outside the realm of possibility, whereas fantasy is pretty much not possible, you know, according to most schools of thought, that we don't have little winged beings that hide in our gardens.
Oh, you don't?
Although they're fun to write about, as I have. The metaphysical, for those who aren't as familiar, it is the intangible component, something we can sense subjectively, but which science cannot yet measure objectively.
It's like writing about faith. Yeah. So that's what I do.
This doesn't have anything to do with, because you mentioned that, about seeing halos on people. Does it have any connection with that, or doesn't? Because that's something that can't be measured scientifically, but many people will swear
they can
that
see
they can see the auras and the chakras and the halos.
I am dying to see auras, and I haven't been able to learn how to do that yet. But I would definitely incorporate that probably in one of my next novels.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
that's the premise of one of mine.
Okay, competition.
A little friendly competition there.
Now, as a show about authors, and I do want you to read in a moment a little bit about this, we also, also talk, your covers are very interesting. And it turns out that your husband's an artist and a pastel artist, like I'm a pastel artist, and we both belong to the Connecticut Pastel Society. Can you show us some of the covers? And they are related, some of them, to Wethersfield and Connecticut.
Absolutely.
And, well, we do have this cover, or the other one. Yes, this cover and that one.
All right, first I'm going to show one that's not related to my covers.
Go ahead.
But
Go ahead.
Everybody loves it. And this is Comstock Ferry. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to just move this book out of the way. This is Comstock Ferry, obviously in the fall. Just before, there we go.
There, I'll hold it for you.
Actually, this is a giclée print, and a lot of people call my husband Jim Sheehy.
Now, notice the pumpkins. We're coming
the pumpkins,
up to
that's right.
Getting rid of that October heat. Now we're in September, and pretty soon it's October.
Now it's different. I mean, the building is owned by somebody else, so that's actually going to be a very historic piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the way he captured it. Now, my book, Field of Destiny, Jim had painted this picture, and he does all pastel paintings. That's called Infinity. And I just thought that sort of represented sort of the world beyond, that sense of the veil, pulling back the veil.
And water is so often associated with the unconscious.
That's right.
And when you go with the horizon, with that place in between places, a lot of mystical things happen at the water.
And symbolically in literature, water represents both birth and death and rebirth. That's the symbol of water. Now this one,
I got it.
You've got it? Okay. This actually challenged our marriage. He actually did 4 different book covers for me. And I've got the other ones here. But, everyone I'd say, no, this isn't right. The book is entitled Veil of Illusion. And
let me interrupt. Like the ink blot test from Rorschach, in the previous painting, you can see the silhouette of a woman's face.
You see the woman's face, which he hadn't intended when he started it. He just said, "Oh, let me do the shoreline," and I said, "Oh, Jim, do the silhouette." And then if you really look, you can actually see a man's silhouette going the other way. That is the Rorschach test on that one. You have to really look. You wanted me to read
I wanted
something.
you to read something now. You told me you wrote a little bit that could be similar to something that's in Wethersfield,
Yes,
even though
and
it doesn't say exactly
Right.
Wethersfield.
That's actually in this book, Veil of Illusion.
And I thought our readers, especially our local viewers, would be interested in hearing that.
I'll read a couple of paragraphs and just do the setup for you. The town is called Riverside because it's by the river, which Old Wethersfield is. And I disguised everything because it really wasn't set in Wethersfield, but that's what I
Patricia,
imagined.
When you finish sharing this segment of your book with the viewers, I'd like to touch on a little bit about your research process.
Absolutely.
Because you do cross into so many time periods.
Absolutely. So this book, what I'm going to be reading to you, does take place in what a Wethersfield person might identify as Old Wethersfield.
Okay.
And in Old Wethersfield, we do have, or they used to hold psychic fairs at the Masonic Hall.
Not anymore?
Now it's at the Keeney Cultural Center.
Okay.
They hold what they're called, now they're called New Age fairs, and it's at the Keeney Cultural Center. But back when I was writing this book, they were called psychic fairs, and they were held at the Masonic home, that brick building on the corner, okay, that's now vacant. And it was across from the United Church of Christ, which was always sort of a disconnect, and it was kind of interesting. So my character is being taken to a psychic fair by her friend Josie, who is open to these things, where the main character, Caitlin, is not. And when I mention Old Town Nursery, picture Comstock Ferry. Okay?
Okay.
So this is chapter 6. And they're heading there at Josie's insistence.
Go ahead.
They'd already driven around the block twice, looking for a parking space. Caitlin strained her neck to get a look at Old Town Nursery down at the corner of the street. They must be having some kind of huge plant sale. Josie didn't answer. She just smiled that closed-lipped smile of hers, as though she had a secret she wasn't yet ready to share. On the third time around, she saw some people leaving and quickly swung into the vacated space. They were parked right across the street from their destination, and right in front of the Riverside Congregational Chapel. Tacked to trees outside the brick VFW Hall, the Masonic Hall, were large poster board sign announcing Psychic Fair 11 to 5, written in colored markers, pink, blue, purple, and yellow. They might as well have drawn balloons and clowns on the signs, Caitlin thought, as she and Josie climbed the cement stairs to the entrance of the old brick building. They pulled open the heavy door and stepped inside to a cacophony of sound and color.
Nice.
So picture Old Wethersfield when you do that.
Okay.
So, Patricia, tell us a little bit about how you prepared for these novels and the process that takes you, that you go through from idea to research to first and final draft.
Oh, wow, that could be an entire course. Actually, Veil of Illusion, which was the first novel that I wrote, was easier. And it was easier because the plot line is linear. It starts here and it ends here, and anything from the past lives are really, they're a little bit of a flashback, but mostly they're in the present life. The people who come in are in the present life, and you get to know why they're in from a past life regression. However, when I was writing Field of Destiny, it starts out in France in 1895, I think. And so you see that past life of the character. You see her die in the first 10 pages. She goes to a place called the Bardo, which is a Tibetan word for where we go to between lives, and then she comes back again, and you see her interact with the different soulmates. I wrote that book with the intention that it was going to be a standalone book. And so many people wanted a sequel.
Including me.
Including you, Karen.
Well, I'm going to mention that I did look up on Amazon, and I was really taken aback. I was really surprised how many people were following, and they did want a sequel, just like you said. And I want you to also mention, after you finish this, about how you got an important thing for an author is to get other readers to participate. And you did that quite well, where they wrote comments and kept the following, So talk on that
that's difficult to do.
Yes, well, we'll like to hear some about that.
So when I was working on Field of Destiny, because I had so many characters who had different lifetimes, and one character actually had to have been alive in 1895, but still alive in contemporary for this book, okay? I had my husband gave me this big chart paper, and it was literally, it would have filled this desk here. and it was huge, and I filled it all in. This time, my computer does my work a little bit more. But this, for instance, is a chart. I don't know if you can see it on TV, but this is an entire chart with the timeline of my different characters for the next novel. So
quite extensive.
Yes.
You can't see it here right now, but I'm going to mention that a timeline is very hard to do when you're writing a book.
Absolutely.
Okay, I had that problem myself because I wrote a memoir, and you have one story that spans 10 years, another story spans 2 years, another story spans 1 day, and how do you put it all together as a timeline in the books? That's very important.
Well, and with this, I needed, because a couple of characters in the new novel called 1,000 Whispers, they get reborn from this novel, okay? And so I needed to know the characters from this novel, what ages they are when those other characters are reborn, and the characters who are reborn need to be about 20 years old when they intersect with the characters in this novel. So,
but it's not only the ages and who's where in the timeline and who's in which lifetime. You're also going into the nuances of a particular point in time, the customs of speech, the customs of dress.
You have to keep track of
what
that.
were maybe the current events. Even
Absolutely.
if it's just a snippet of information, you get a historical fiction fan who reads that and you're wrong, you're going to hear from them.
And you have to throw in.
Hold on a second. That is so correct, because you'll hear in movies that have done that, famous movies,
Taking
where
too many liberties.
they'll say, you know what, you mentioned this, but that wasn't invented yet.
Oh,
You hear that many times, okay, when they're doing a historical movie. So it's very important that you keep track, okay?
Well, and in here, in Field of Destiny, Martin Luther King's speech plays a key role in somebody who's just passed away, who died in an accident. And so I had to make sure that those dates, everything coincided. And I'm a perfectionist about that stuff. And thank goodness for the internet now. I mean, there was a time when you had to go to the library, which I love the library, but it was harder to write at midnight. You needed just that one little throwaway fact that made the difference, because it actually grounded your narrative. So I love the internet. Love it.
What's the most difficult part of this process for you? What's the part that you get to where you go, it's time for a walk or time for a few days break?
Description. I know my characters. I'm good with dialogue. But when I have to stop and describe something, I find that that's hard for me. I have to really, sometimes I'll Google, what does a sunset look like? I know what it looks like, but I need other artists and other people to remind me of how the colors settle in and the color of dusk and all that. And then I can meld it all into my own language.
Well, you brought that up, and that's very interesting, because one of the things to solve that is to take some art courses to improve your creativity. And even though your husband did that for you, need him to sit with you a little bit on that. But yes, an author is an artist also, and they should take in other elements, in other genres, they should take...
we paint pictures with words, so I agree with you
Be
on
a photographer, take a course in
I
photography,
like
or a course in art.
I actually like to play with photography, and I think that it is helpful, because you have to learn how to frame things and see things differently.
In a different perspective,
Absolutely, absolutely. When I was going after my master's degree at Wesleyan, I had to take courses outside of the writing genre, and that was kind of scary for me. And I took one called the Artist's Book, thinking that it would be about books. And you had to deconstruct books and paint in them and really learn to tap into that other side of you.
Another thing would be something Karen can help you with, is that you learn meditation with all the senses. Okay, and that'll help you take in consideration when you are developing a scene to use the different senses, not just be on one plane.
Right. And the other thing, like right now I'm stuck on a small plot point in the new novel I'm working on, 1,000 Whispers. And so what I do is, if I'm stuck on a plot point, I go back maybe 8 chapters, and I start reading and seeing where I might not have planted the right threads to carry forward, and that's why I'm stuck on a plot point. So I go back and I read and I fine-tune and I polish those chapters
It's kind
And
of like a kitten following
Yeah,
that
exactly.
string of yarn, wondering where's it anchored.
And then it catapults me. I mean, you know, it's just sort of, it's not even really a catapult, but you're moving and you're polishing and suddenly you go, oh, that's what it's supposed to be, you know?
Let's talk a little bit about 1,000 Whispers, because not only was it unexpected that you would write this sequel, but once you got it rolling, you had a tragic life event that really curtailed your progress. And talk a little bit about that.
This is hard to talk about, but my husband and I'm his second wife. He's my first husband, but I'm his second wife. And when we married, we've been married 38 years now, his daughter, Patty Ann, Patricia Ann, moved in with us. She was a rebellious 14-year-old, and her sister Ann, or actually Patty was 13 and Ann was 14. They moved in and lived in our home here in Wethersfield, went to Wethersfield High. And interestingly enough, her name was Patricia Ann Sheehy, as my name is, Patricia Ann Sheehy. And she was about to be married this past December, and in November she was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. And they told us it would be brutal. They told us it would be fast. And it was. We brought her home. We nursed her with hospice until she died in February.
I hear that.
But that stopped all the writing, although I did keep a journal around all of that. But it actually, and here's the part, this is a gift from Patty, it actually reinformed some of the scenes that I was writing in 1,000 Whispers, because it dealt with accepting the death of a loved one. And I realized that I had written them a little too carelessly, a little just not with the depth that they needed. And so having just gone through it and feeling so raw, when I could start writing again, I used the emotions from dealing with Patty's death.
Well, I'm certain it's going to be another evocative read.
I hope so.
We're coming to the end of our show, and I think this was very educational and very interesting, as we do in all our shows. If you can sign over a copy.
I would be thrilled to. And Karen, I wish you luck and everything.
Thank you.
Jason, I hope
Thank
we
you.
get to do this again.
This was fun.
Well, you have plenty enough books.
Between us all, we could open up our own library.
Yeah, I don't want to have any competition with the Wethersfield Library, but
I'm
No,
curious.
it's a great library.
Patricia, do you have any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with the viewers in regard to maybe some esoteric secrets you've learned in writing these novels?
Actually, what I've learned and what I'd like to share is listen to your inner voice. Life is short. Whatever it is that's your passion, do it.
Thank
I mean,
you.
absolutely do it, because at the end of your life, I think the worst thing would be to look back and say, oh, I sat there and watched TV and I could have done
And I could have done
whatever it is. Don't have regrets.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you.